If there is no threat to Americans, if there is no threat to our data privacy security, why did an internal memo from TikTok corporate headquarters explicitly coach senior management to, quote, downplay the parent company ByteDance? Why, if you had nothing to hide, would you need to downplay the association with ByteDance in China?
Congressman, I have not seen this memo.
And promoting robust international people-to-people exchanges and cooperation.
Hunter Biden's business associate sent over $1 million to 3 of your family members. Any reactions to that report?
House Oversight says they've got bank records showing a Chinese energy company paying 3 Biden family members through a third party. What were they paid for?
Look, I'm just not going to respond to that from here.
He's telling us that he paid around $11,000 to complete the strip that's either paid to a cartel or different human smuggling groups. But he just arrived here in Texas, once again, just highlighting that this sector is leading the nation in those illegal crossings.
According to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, directed energy can produce force that ranges from deterrent to damaging to destructive. Many countries, including the U.S., are researching their use. Different types of electromagnetic energy have different properties. High-energy lasers produce a very narrow beam of light, usually in the infrared to visible region, and are typically used on one target at a time. The beam can be pulsed or continuous, generating a power output of at least 1 kilowatt. This output is 200,000 times greater than a typical laser pointer and is capable of melting steel. Furthermore, wouldn't a covert satellite-based laser in concert with known weather modification technology capable of waging mass land theft and agricultural devastation benefit the Great Reset greatly by merely hiding behind the climate change narrative?
You have the right to stay private and protect your personal data. Your personal data is being sold online by data brokers right now. If you don't have the time to go through each and every website that may or may not have any information on you, then try Delete Me. Delete Me will take care of removing your data from public databases and people's search sites. To do what we did to remove our data and get your personal information removed from the internet, go to joindeleteme.com/anonymous. We value privacy as we know how our personal data can be used against us. That's why we recommend Delete Me. Delete Me is giving 20% off to anyone who uses the code ANONYMOUS. Again, that's joindeleteme.com/anonymous. It's like having your own personal privacy assistant who takes care of all the hard work for you and protects your data. Special thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring this portion of the video.
The rot is real. America is deliberately being destroyed from within.
I don't know if I'm tripping or not, but is that an upside down cross, bro?
As the expanse of the western United States has finally been breached.
Over the last year, prices are down on everyday items from a gallon of gasoline to a gallon of milk. And folks are beginning to feel it.
Inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. Consumer prices are up nearly 14%. Gasoline is up 39.1%. And while an infinite number of illegals line up to receive Obamacare, the number of American citizens without health insurance went down by 4.2 million. Publicly held debt is up 13.7%, and the amount of citizens on food stamps has increased. Adding to Old Yeller's inevitable reckoning with the data, his main handler, Barack Obama, is reportedly panicking, begging Old Yeller to drop out while frantically playing musical chairs with his kids. Old Yeller hasn't just angered MAGA Republicans with vitriol aimed at millions of Americans free to vote for whoever they choose.
Democracy means rejecting and repudiating political violence. Regardless of party, such violence is never, never, never acceptable in America. It's undemocratic, and it must never be normalized to advance political power.
And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not.
A new migrant crisis is brewing in the United States. Unlike the one at the southern border, This one will be all over the country. Evictions are rising rapidly as millions of Americans face soaring rent increases driven by inflation, a shortage of affordable housing, and the end of the pandemic relief. Rent prices are now 31.4% higher than pre-pandemic levels, with a median rent surpassing $2,000 in May 2024, according to Zillow. This explains why a quarter of U.S. renters say they can no longer afford rent, and about 1 in 5 plan to move back in with parents or with friends, according to a study by Inuit Credit Karma. The current housing market has many Americans making adjustments to their living situations, including relocating to less expensive cities and even moving back in with their families, said Courtney Olive, consumer financial advocate at Inuit Credit Karma. What's most concerning is that rising housing costs aren't just impacting younger generations, but older generations too. Olive noted that while rent prices have been surging in most parts of the country for a while, Americans have also had inflation, higher borrowing costs, and record high credit card debt to contend with. That's on top of federal student loan payments that resumed in October. No wonder why so many Americans are feeling pessimistic about the economy. Earlier this year, a Harvard study found that half of the country's 102 million renters spend a third or more of their income on housing. In other words, about 51 million households are currently cost-burdened by rent. Whitney Egud-Obriki, a senior research associate at Harvard, said, "It's one of the worst years we've ever seen." She added that the number of Americans spending 30% or more on rent in 2024 had not been seen since the Great Recession in 2008, when 10 million Americans lost their homes to foreclosure. The hardest hit have been renters who made less than $30,000 and who, after paying rent and utilities, were left with just $310 a month on average, Egud-Obriki said. So you can certainly imagine the kinds of trade-offs that have to happen, she stressed. Cost-burdened renters are spending less on things like food and health care and retirement funds, so there are significant implications for the long-term well-being of these households. Marianne Smith, a 65-year-old Oklahoma resident, pays around 35% of her income on rent. "I eat or I pay my bills," she told ABC News. "Had I not had family and friends that could afford to just put money in my bank account, I would be on the streets." When asked how lower rent costs could impact her life, Smith said, "Oh my God, I eat 3 meals a day instead of 2 or 1. Let's start there." According to Sarah Sadian, the Senior Vice President of Public Policy and Field Organizing at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, Smith's case is sadly just one among millions. The soaring costs of housing is putting numerous families on the brink. When you're devoting so much of your very limited income toward housing, it means that any sort of financial hiccup, your car breaks down, your kid is sick, or you miss a day off work, that very easily can spiral out of control, Sadian explained. She continued, "More and more households that are struggling to pay rent are living just one sort of financial shock away from facing evictions and, in worst cases, homelessness. In some areas, rent costs have quadrupled since 2013. Denver single mom Caitlin Colbert saw her 2-bedroom apartment rent rise by 400% over the last decade, from $750 to $3,374 last year. Just like millions of struggling families out there, Colbert has been juggling her costs month by month. Pay rent or swim team fees for one of her 3 kids. Rent or school supplies. Rent or groceries. How much longer can we ignore the millions struggling to keep a roof over their heads? Our country desperately needs some profound changes. Americans are sick and tired of failed policies and false promises. We need action, and we need it now.